what happens with, during the apocalypse, what's going to happen? People are going to do podcasts. People are going to still have conversations. Yeah. So these conversations, we just set them in these surreal universes where shit's melting down and, where like Clancy meets these various people and kind of learns from them.
Hey guys, my name is Guy and today I'm going to give you my own analysis and explanation of the Netflix show The Midnight Gospel. I hope you like it and let's just start with the video. The Midnight Gospel is a Netflix animated show created by Pendleton Ward, the creator of Adventure Time, and Duncan Trussell, a comedian known for his podcasts The Duncan Trussell Family Hour and his appearances on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. The show is based on actual podcast interviews between Trussell and various guests, which are then set in the dimension known as the Chromatic Ribbon, where Duncan Trussell portrays a spacecaster named Clancy Gilroy that travels through worlds about to have their own apocalypses, interviewing some of the residents for his spacecast.
You picked Glasses Man. This sim has a 23 charisma rating. Great choice.
This first episode is based on the second podcast that Duncan Trussell had with Dr. Drew, who is here portrayed as the Glasses Man, where they talk about drugs and the complexity behind its usage. The episode starts with Clancy, who decides to interview Glasses Man in the midst of its own zombie apocalyptic world, which, after entering his simulator and following on him, soon discovers that Glasses Man is the president of this planet, in a way giving us a ruling perspective from Dr. Drew's opinion. Right from the beginning, we see a chaotic world where people are being eaten by zombies, and at the same time protesting for legalization of weed in front of the White House. And this segues into Dr. Drew saying that it's a misconception that the people think he's anti-weed and anti-legalization, and he explains that he isn't pro either, and he actually believes in human liberty and freedom of choice, but also that he does not know if legalization and liberty is something that will result in any good for the people.
Just get me a rifle. I'll take care of it. You were saying?
Oh, yeah. I read a recent study that said medical marijuana was associated with close to 30% fewer deaths.
It's actually more data has come in since that.
With that, they start talking about studies on how weed impacts the usage of opioids and results in fewer deaths and fewer people to resort to those pills to treat chronic pain and depression. I myself searched for studies to verify this claim, and I easily found some that confirm this, saying that not only are there doctors from states where weed is legal that prescribe less opioids to their patients, but also that the people studied were the major difference in which by themselves they reduced their opioid consumption due to the possibility of replacing it by weed. If you want, I'll leave a link in the description. This then correlates to them talking about the difference in the consumption of weed and opioids, where Dr. Drew explains that opioid disables people's minds and functions. They become hopeless, he says. And weed, by the other hand, also has the capacity to lock someone on the couch and become unproductive, but that there's also a lot of people that live and function just fine on weed.
Well, one facet of marijuana that doesn't exist in the opiates is that if you overdose on marijuana...
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. President!
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. President!
Hello.
Mr. President! Thank you!
Anyway.
While we see Glasses Man save his people by shooting zombies with a rifle, they start talking about the lethality of prescription pills and their volatility to overdose, which compared to weed where you can only get overly paranoid with your inner worries and anxiety, the differences are very clear in the mortal consequences. This leads into Duncan telling a story about his experience with mixing benzodiazepine and alcohol. This combination of a psychoactive and tranquilizer drug with an impairing and depressive chemical like alcohol can cause various deadly side effects, one of which is severe short memory loss that causes the user to forget that they've taken the drug, making them usually take more of it. And one of the dangers that Dr. Drew talks about is the physical impairment that it causes. Benzos are a muscle relaxant, and that combined with the blackout effect of alcohol can cause a victim to gag and transport liquids to the lungs, and either affect them or even suffocate. Thankfully, Duncan survived the experience so that he could tell us about it in Midnight Gospel. But all this discussion leads to what I believe to be the premise and moral of this episode, which is told to us by Glasses Man. There's no such thing as a good drug and a bad drug. There's this chemical that's neither good nor bad. It just exists. This is a relationship that humans have with the substance that is the issue. And this idea is explored and explained throughout the episode, pondering in the consequences of what that means.
All right, look, we're going to have to initiate Alpha Protocol. Onward, Charlotte.
We then follow them escaping the White House while it is eaten by a gigantic zombie, where Dr. Drew gives us a shocking theory saying that the founding fathers of America proposed to give magic mushrooms to leaders they deemed horrible and evil, but the duality of problem of the results of taking the drug were an obstacle in that plan, claiming that we neither know if it will change the victim morals or potentiate their previous ones. Even though I couldn't find any info about the veracity of this story, I think it's important to note that this theory itself has been tested with a different objective, but the same premise. And for those who know, I'm obviously talking about the MKUltra project, done by the CIA in the 1950s and the 1970s, which intended to use the psychedelics and other drugs to control the mind of soldiers and prisoners. And just like in the situation that Dr. Drew talked about, one of the reasons the experiment ended was because the psychedelics often made the people more prone to disobedient behavior than the intended controlled behavior.
One of my favorite statements is, health is about accepting and perceiving and dealing with reality on reality's terms.
In this next scene, we start to get a different perspective on this matter, that personally I loved. That is a spiritual and insightful look into the recreational use of drugs, that in itself can be applied into various aspects of our lives. In the saying of Dr. Drew, health is about accepting and perceiving and dealing with realities on reality's terms. This is a very powerful statement that will be further explored in this episode, but I want to enforce right now what it means. Although it may seem obvious, when you apply this to your own life, it creates a deep realization of the importance to accept your reality without trying to control it, while at the same time trying to understand it and learn how it works. It becomes this big embracement that everything is thrown at you, while you also confront it and overcome it. To put it simply, like the Buddhist said, it's to somewhat understand that life is suffering, and to achieve peace of mind we must not be attached to that suffering and just accept it. But we move. Further exploring the polarity of psychedelics, Clancy gives us an elevator analogy into how these drugs elevate you to a different realm of peace and information, and then make you come down into reality again with only a glimpse of what you saw. And here, Glasses Man counters asking what if the elevator goes down instead of up, referring to the psychotic dangers that these drugs can put you in. And Clancy responds here explaining that experience is still profound, and even if it's chaotic and terrorizing, you still got to experience the same essence as if you went up in the elevator. And this goes back to the first statement that Dr. Drew made about the use of drugs, in that the chemical gave you the same result and essence that it would ever give you. But it's your situation, setting, mind and physical reaction that dictate if you will have a good or bad experience.
Are you okay?
Yeah, just keep moving.
You know what's weird? Why are we even running from them? They're pretty slow.
I know.
Yeah, look, we could just stand. Look, let's just stand still.
Let's come get me. Come on, zombies.
Right here!
Oh, no. I think that's my aunt.
After this, we see them going to a mall, where Duncan Trussell more personally talks on how psychedelics helped him deal with his anger and how they introduced him to the practice of mindfulness and meditation. Duncan then explains how that practice works, and how it is based on the Buddhist practice of being able to externalize yourself from your reality and evaluate your actions and situation without any attachments to it, which enables you to really question and understand the way you react to everything in your life. In this case, they talk more specifically about emotions and anger, and truthfully, this can be applied to any thought, feeling, emotion, expression and action you ever have in your life. It is a key in dissecting your own behavior and truly understanding yourself.
Just
All right, and push.
breathe.
Oh, no.
You can do this.
Push. Breathing's before.
But
push.
then you breathe. Isn't it breathing?
No,
first?
it's a push.
Oh, hello, dear.
get out of here.
In the following scene, we have Clancy, glasses man and pregnant woman, which recently became a mother, running away from skateboarding zombos. And in here, Duncan Trussell talks about how in Buddhism, all these analyses are secondary to the simple observation of the build-up and releasing of these processes in our lives, and how all of them follow the same wave pattern on going up and down. Here, Dr. Drew responds in a somewhat surprising way, giving a perspective that I personally didn't think about, saying that he can't feel or reach that realm of observation without an interpersonal context. That to me means that not everybody can rationalize and perform this practice of mindfulness and just to do it by themselves, but through a conversation and an external stimulation that allows and helps in the process of reaching that observational state. Dr. Drew goes further, even claiming that most people that practice mindfulness don't actually do it to the level in which it's being described. But Duncan explains further that according to Buddhism, this community that tries to reach the truth through this process are called the sangha, and that the big part of the practice itself is also helping each other to reach that higher plane of consciousness, just as Dr. Drew said earlier in the show, of meeting reality on reality's terms.
The practice too. You're talking about the sangha, or the spiritual community, which is acknowledged in Buddhism too. What's important is let's encourage each other to get as close to the truth as we can, or as you mentioned earlier, to meeting reality on reality's terms.
And as they steal an air balloon from some French zombies, we are given the conclusion of this mindfulness thought process, in which he explains that it searches for the state where you become fully aware of your own awareness to the point of pure consciousness. And that is what our human essence truly is, providing the fact that you are your own consciousness, but also the awareness of that consciousness, meaning that you are not only the individual that experiences reality, but also the reality itself. You are the one that perceives the all, and the all that perceives the one.
Whoa.
With the episode close to its end, we are then given what to me is the first meaningful and important analogy within the animation and the theme of the episode, in the form of Clancy and Glasses Man turning into zombies. Which was previously an obvious, scary and terrible thing, but now we are given a perspective of bliss and happiness and connection between the zombies in the form of a beautiful song that is also quickly disturbed and corrupted by survivors that try to rescue and heal their president back to normal. In my opinion, this scene is a direct analogy to the misconception about drugs and how Ross and the people view them, where the bite of a zombie can be compared to the consumption of a drug, and how when you are in the experience and embrace it, even though it was something terrifying before, like psychedelics are viewed, only when you take it you are able to truly know what it can give you and show you. And the people that come to save the president attacking with antidote harpoons can be analyzed as the way society handles the drug situation, with a drug war, in which, while they are trying to cure the zombies, in the end, even after the president is cured, he still gets to be eaten and killed by the other zombies, giving the idea that the plan the people had was utterly useless. That translates to the basic idea that handling the drug situation with aggression and hate and trying to make people antagonize this problem, in a way, just made it worse quicker. In that instead of trying to understand what and how a drug can make you feel, they decide to just repress and detest it, which ultimately doesn't work. This last part about the survivors rescuing Glasses Man can also be analyzed in another, more individual way, in which they are not society or the laws, but they are symbolized reality itself. What I mean by this is that if becoming a zombie is like taking psychedelics, the actions of the survivors are the painful realization of returning to our only bodily reality, which isn't as blissful or magical as the psychedelic realm can be. And that after all, we must learn to live by these reality rules, and that becoming a zombie is but one of the parts of that reality.
Thank you so much for being a great guest. Do you have any last words?
Thank you for having me. Last words. There's no such thing as a bad drug. It's the circumstances. Goodbye.
And so we finish this episode with the last quote from Dr. Drew. There's no such thing as a bad drug, it's the circumstances. Which loops back to the beginning of the episode, where Clancy and Glasses Man talked about the complexity of drug usage. But now, with all the added information about the spiritual side of this matter, we then end up agreeing with this statement, understanding that the reaction we get from the chemical and the experience it gives us is utterly meaningless, and that the benefits we get from the way we use and analyze and embrace these experiences. In conclusion, I think this first episode has a lot of information about the way to perceive and understand the usage of drugs. It gives us a beautiful side of insight and awareness to this very real problem without necessarily enforcing the idea that drugs are good or drugs are bad. The episode is well organized, giving us a very real and palpable perspective on how drugs are subjective, while slowly it leads us to a mindful and spiritual way of looking at the core of the problem. We then end up with a pretty clear view of the greater power and control we actually have on these drugs, while it reinforces that the way to get that control is through giving it up. And well, that's all about this first episode. There's obviously more to connect and discuss, but these were the parts that impacted me more and I felt like they deserved being talked about. I hope you enjoyed the video. If there's anything you agree and disagree with me, please let me know in the comments. I love debating about this stuff. Next time I'll do episode 2, so be sure to subscribe and stay tuned. Bye!